Thank you very much, Pierre, for the excellent moderation and also the very useful insights that we got from this first session. Now we are going to concentrate more about the empowerment of smallholders through digital literacy and also on the policy recommendation perspective. And with no further ado, I would like to give the floor to my FAO colleagues. First, Puyun Yang, and then Marzia Pafumi to elaborate more on the topics. Yang, you have the floor first, please.
Thank you very much, Nevena. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And actually, we have developed the policy recommendations based on our results from the FAO and the CABI needs assessment and capacity development of the extension and the weather service through digital innovations. And also recent studies have revealed that smallholder farmers' low digital literacy, along with insufficient digital home capital development, has become permanent barriers and constraints for them to access digital extension and advisor service. So my recommendation is very straightforward, and I would like to have recommendation in 3 aspects today. Maybe it's not include everything, but I think this is addressing the key issues. First, I would like to have some recommendation on enabling policies and institutional support. And first, we think it is necessary to review current EAS policies and institutional structures to develop a framework of agriculture retention policies reform to enhance digital EAS. And that's because in many countries, current EAS policies is needed to update to including the digital, advancement. And secondly, we think we need to establish a coordination mechanism between the different government departments, including agriculture, education, ICT management, and the financial departments for collaborative supporting digital EAS and infrastructure development in rural areas. Thirdly, we think it's necessary to introduce a financial mechanism to support the commitment to EAS agencies, farmer organizations, NGOs, ICT industries, and the private sectors on the provision of the digital EAS and the infrastructure development in the rural areas. Fourthly, we think engage the hardest to reach smallholder farmer segments, especially women, by incorporating gender targets as part of the investment and the fund guarantees for the access to digital EAS. I think, and the previous presentation also have, talking about the gender issues, and we need to, address in the policy and the development. And the second category of recommendation is through the farmer education and digital literacy. I think there are many constraints and many barriers we need to overcome. And the farmer education, and I would like to focus on, is very important. And we need to conduct this assessment and identify the gaps between the smallholder realities and their potentials, which could be harnessed through the digital EAS. And we need to set up the empowerment goals. And secondly, I think we need to develop the education guidelines and the training curriculum. And empowerment EAS providers through the training of training courses and the training farmers and digital literacy through the education activities and the e-learning platforms. Thirdly, we suggest conduct the demonstration and extension programs on farmer education and digital literacy. I think some countries, and for example, in some countries in China, in some East Asian countries, they have a national program on the demonstration and the extension programs on the farmer education and the digital literacy. They have the national training programs on the teaching farmers how to using the mobile phones and how to access to the digital platforms to access to EAS information and technologies. And lastly, we think we need to promote the multi-actor innovation platforms to support smallholder farmers' education and digital literacy and access to digital EAS. And I think today we have some country cases. They have very good, multi-actor innovation platforms. For example, in the e-commerce, such as Pinduoduo, and in Kenya, I have iCow, multi-actor innovation platforms. They have, their approach to employment of the smallholder farmers. And the last category of the recommendation, where we would like to see we need to coordinate joint actions. At the policy level, we suggest promote the coordinated joint planning and decision making to take into account the needs of the different stakeholders in the regions based on the local context, and promote farmer education and training and digital literacy in the rural areas. At the institutional level, we think the engagement of different sectors such as EAS, education, ICT enterprises, input suppliers, agribusiness, NGOs, investing and financial agencies, and farmer organizations to jointly take coordination and coordinate actions to promote farmer education and digital literacy. And remember, empowerment of smallholder and family farmers to access to digital EAS should be concretized in political commitment and concrete actions. For example, engage them actively through planning, design, monitoring, and evaluation digital EAS, and enable them to exchange, share, and provide feedback on the digital EAS through multiple interactions of farmer to extension, farmer to farmer, farmer to private sectors. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Okay, over to you, Nevena.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yang, for this excellent presentation. And I would like to invite our colleague, Marzia, from the Rural Transformation and the Gender Equity Division of FAO to provide her talk.
Hello, hi everyone. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the introduction, Nevena. Let me see if I can share my screen. Sorry about that. Don't know why I'm not able to do that. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, let me just check. Okay. So first of all, as I was saying, it's a pleasure for me to be here and represent the task force, the digitalization task force of FAO Inclusive Rural Transformation and Gender Equality Division. We are a cross thematic team, and our vision is very much in line, very much aligned with the topics that are being discussed today. We actually working to raise the question of who will be able to participate in the digital agriculture, digital economic growth, and who will be likely to be left behind, putting a particular emphasis on the most vulnerable, rural women, smallholders, youth, migrant workers, indigenous peoples, and so forth. Today I'll be sharing some insights from my work to enable meaningful engagement and digital inclusion of youth in agri-food systems that I developed through the FAO integrated country approach to boost decent jobs for youth in agri-food systems. So first of all, there is a growing consensus on the prominent role of youth in agri-food systems as agents of change, and this is due to their big innovation potential, their ability to learn fast, their innovative attitudes. So they're really on the spotlight when it comes to spearheading sustainable transition to modern agri-food systems. It is true that youth are, show much more interest and familiarity with digital technologies. There is also evidence that educated youth also have higher potential as early adopters of digital tools, plus they can work as intermediaries with their families and communities. Youth have been showing also an ability to manage ICTs in creative ways, to aggregate demand and supply of agricultural products, services, to attract or crowdsource investments. Actually, most of the digital platform and startups and agtech companies are led by youth. For one in Kenya, which is a leading country in this sector, like the average age of agtech firm owners is 33. And then, of course, the COVID-19 came and disrupted the system. So it really prompted many enterprising youth to adapt to new learning or business models and basically shift to the digital space. But yet, there are significant barriers for digital inclusion of young people, and these intersect with many other vulnerabilities. So while virtually in developed countries, almost every youth is connected, this percentage goes down to 38% in least developed countries. And if we look at the African region, despite steady growth of ICT infrastructure and access over the last decades, there is still 60% of the youth who remain offline. Both gender and rural-urban divides persist, but I think there is evidence now that the largest gap is associated with the people who are living in areas that are covered by a mobile broadband network, but are not using the internet. So basically, this calls for unpacking barriers to digital inclusion, and on top of the typical access divides that are linked to poor connectivity in rural areas and affordability when it comes to purchasing power to buy digital devices or services. It is also important to take into consideration the so-called second order divides. That are those that hinder the meaningful use of digital technologies, and these include digital literacy, of course, language and relevance of digital contents, and the broader social environment, power relations, social and gender norms, and all the intersectionalities linked to that. So to avoid that new digital services or applications end up widening existing divides, it's very important to focus on the people who are going to use the technology. And so it's vital to engage with prospective users of the digital products or services to be developed, test assumptions and their readiness, their specific needs, their capacities, and the broader social and environmental, broader ecosystem, let's say. This is basically what human-centered digital development is all about engaging users to assess their readiness to uptake digital solutions and working closely with them throughout the project cycle to co-design and then make sure, test, make sure that the digital solutions are need-based and context-appropriate, therefore building some sustainability on those. It's important to analyze the communication system both online and offline because this can really, both dimensions can really determine the uptake and the engagement in the digital space. So beyond access to ICTs and ICT-based services, it's important to look at how the information flows. How, for instance, the youth access or exchange information about agriculture, agribusiness, areas, what are the topics of interest for them, and also how they use ICTs per se and ICT-based services like e-extension, e-commerce, e-learning. What are their habits, their content consumption behaviors, what are their preferences in terms of formats, etc. Then there's the dimension of digital literacy, and this goes beyond skills. It also includes knowledge, awareness about digital services. It includes attitudes towards that kind of service. So beyond the technical know-how, it's really about the ability to safely and effectively access and operate in the digital world. And then, as I was saying, the social environment before. So in sum, it's important for inclusive engagement strategies to always adopt a mixed approach. I think this has been said already today, and blend digital engagement and offline engagement to make the most of, a combined set of channels. I wanted to give you some examples from our work with the Human-Centered Design for Youth Engagement. This is from Guatemala, where FAO supported the development of an innovative service to foster youth interest and then ability to pursue a career in agriculture, particularly through self-employment in migration-prone areas of the country. What I'm showing here is, very few insights. The assessment report is available online. But I just want to show you the process. Everything started with a participatory assessment involving the youth in those target areas, and apparently some of the data make us really optimistic, because majority would own cell phones, 70% smartphones. They were interacting daily with SMS, chat, social networks. Astonishing majority would say that mobiles and the social networks were the most appropriate channel for them to receive and then share agricultural information, right? But then, behind the information that it's easily actionable from here, that can translate in technical features of a digital device, it's very important to complement with other aspects that I was mentioning before. So for instance, we looked at the trusted information sources, and we realized that, okay, not surprisingly, internet and social networks were there immediately after the closest circle of family and friends. But then, okay, local producer organizations, and then our counterparts, the extension agents of the Ministry of Agriculture, were completely off the radar. They were not even there mentioned. And basically, when looking at the other side, we also realized that less than 10% of the youth extension workers were actually using those channels that are popular among the youth, like mobile and social media, to communicate with them. Why I'm telling you this? Because of course these findings informed the design and the decision to develop a dedicated service where these young farmers could more easily demand and access and share information about agriculture, entrepreneurship, etc., work opportunities, finding opportunities. The process implied that FAO collaborated closely with young local developers, organized repeat consultations with 100 of youth and local technicians, because both are prospective users of the platform, to prototype the technical solution. As I was saying, technical features were immediately derived from the assessment. Of course, we had to decide for a multi-channel system that integrated web and mobile. We had to acknowledge that there were existing mostly gender-based differences in access to ICTs, so that 30% not owning a smartphone were mostly women and married young women. So the platform was designed to also integrate text messages, or for instance, registration would not only be through email, because only 1 in 4 youth were actually having an email account, etc. But then also some challenges arose, because we wanted these youth to be engaged in discussion groups as well, to share among themselves and with local technicians, but there were problems in this, and even user-generated content, which is a big component for sustainability of this kind of services, was really a bit of a challenge for us. What was the reason behind that? Of course, digital skills. We had the chance to assess this in a subsequent project, more or less in the same areas in Guatemala this year. And we replicated the assessment, but with a focus on digital skills. Not surprisingly, we found out that, you know, despite high internet access, there was a very low use of social media and WhatsApp for business purposes. There was still a gender gap, and there were very low digital skills when it comes in particular to online collaboration, digital content creation, using of digital applications for problem solving, and safety. Digital safety was really a problem among the youth. So this became a training program. Basically, we decided to develop digital skills for this youth to progressively gain, you know, from the most basic to the intermediate digital skills that could improve their personal and business presence online. And then we also developed an advanced training to equip a small group of youth with digital devices and then also specific communication skills, so they could start generating that content and also self-represent young migrants, returnees, and indigenous women in this platform. I don't think there's enough time to go through another case. The reports will be available, but what I wanted to share with you is that we have been applying this methodology across different geographies and different contexts. And we have been testing assumptions, even with groups of youth that are traditionally considered, you know, better off and very much connected. We conducted this year an assessment with young agripreneurs in East Africa. And the assessment was entirely conducted online. So we were already talking to people who are connected, were able to respond an online survey, etc. And we were asking, are they facing the same access barriers? How do they interact with digital technology? The objective of this was to profile the prospective users of the African Youth Agripreneurs platform that you can see there. It was launched in August. And it's an online community for individual agripreneurs and youth organizations across Africa to share, connect, network in their journey, let's say, to embrace agricultural decent and profitable work. Why I'm sharing this here, because I wanted to let you know that, of course, even the assessment has to really be tailored to the user group. So in this case, we focused on access to business support services online, e-commerce, digital finance, online mentoring. We came up with very specific pieces of information and actionable insights that were really important to make smart design decisions and choose strategically the appropriate IT infrastructure, the formats, the channels. We took into account the major pain points in the user journey of these youth with existing services online, and we developed specific design challenges that turned out into what is now the core services offered by the AYA platform. To conclude, I just wanted to share with you a few, this kind of actionable insights on youth digital engagement, also from a perspective of extension and advisory service providers. I think it's very important, very clear that youth demand very friendly interactions. They like multimedia formats, a balance of video, text, photos, and it's important to use the digital tools that are already popular amongst them, social media, WhatsApp, etc. Oops, sorry. It's important to repackage and adapt the content to suit these different formats, and the entertainment component should not be overlooked. They always look for customized information, tailored support, very much outcome-oriented, not just random pieces of information. There's a need for mentoring rather than traditional advice. Some follow-up, more direct interactions, and this can be provided by actors that have a high level of trust, like lead farmers or skilled extension agents, but in many cases they really prefer peer-to-peer learning. So youth champions, it's important to engage them also as providers, as advisory services, because youth really want a safe environment to share and learn from each other. They very much appreciate networking, learning about experiences and across borders, and key, they are not willing or able to pay for access and usage of online services. Affordability is very important. They also need to use a platform that doesn't consume much data bundles because they cannot afford it. There's also a need for, in general, there's a need for gender-sensitive approaches, multi-channels, as we said, to reach also those underserved groups in maybe remotest rural areas. And so blending online and offline approaches, combining low tech and more new ICTs, it's always the best option we have to serve different users and contexts. We work a lot with youth organizations as intermediaries of this information. They can have easier access to digital services and then find their own ways to increase outreach at the grassroots level. It's very important to build in a digital skills development component in any digital or ICT-based service development initiative. And it's important to consider digital literacy, as I was saying before, beyond the skills. Tackling also, some misconceptions, some reluctancy to do activities online. There's a lot of fear of scams online. And then there's also, it's also, I think, very important for me from what we learned to upgrade the capacities of service providers themselves. No, they are sometimes, they are also users of the digital services in many cases, not just the youth or the smallholder farmers are as end users. And it's important to assess their readiness. In many cases, they are less ready than the at least when it comes to young persons, the service provider were less ready than the end users themselves. No, so it's important to build capacities for them in terms of digital skills and also in terms of really reframing the way they provide their services, they provide the information to make sure that it suits this new format.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marzia, for your very in-depth insights. We still have to hear from 4 very interesting country cases from Uganda, from Kenya, China, and Norway. Marzia and Yang, unfortunately, I won't be able to ask some questions directly on the plenary from you, but please do check the question and answer section and also the chat, where your talks generated a lot of discussion. So please feel free to directly respond. And I would like to invite Daniel to elaborate on the Uganda case on empowerment of smallholder farmers. You will hear very interesting presentations on the platforms, on mobile apps, and other tools. So Daniel, please have the floor. And I would also advise Sue to try to share her screen by the end of Daniel's presentation, who is going to talk. Over to you, Daniel.
Good afternoon, good evening. Of course, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Daniel. Ninsiima. Ninsiima might be hard for everyone. I want to share my screen. I have, I don't know if you're able to see my my screen.
Yes.
Just a minute. So I'll share my our case study. I work with an agri company called e-Omulimisa. That might be hard for many of you across the world for sure, but I'll get into that. So e-Omulimisa is basically means extension officer. It comes from Luganda, which is one of the major languages that comes from the central part of Uganda. So e-Omulimisa means extension officer, and the M stands basically for mobile extension officer. And we're an agri company. That means that we leverage technology to provide agriculture-related services, mainly extension, but of course we get into other things as well, as I will explain later. We began as an SMS-based e-extension platform for literate farming communities in Uganda back in 2013, but then we formally registered as a company in 2017 with the funding from UC Berkeley. That was after this becoming actually my master's research project based at Michigan State. So then we, actually got funding to, make this happen by working with the farmers and extension officers and other stakeholders in Uganda. But now we've expanded from just providing extension, and the reason is that farmers oftentimes require more than just, providing information. We, for example, had cases where you would recommend a certain practice or maybe technology, and then the farmers be like, yes, I know that is very good for me, but I do not have the resources to be able to afford that or access it. So then there was actually need for us to get into other things, including micro input loaning, where we actually work with a microfinance institution, deliver farm inputs for small scale farmers on credit, and then they pay later once they harvest the crop and sell it. So we now have a wide range of products and services, from mobile-based extension, where we integrate both SMS and app-based services. SMS, of course, is for small-scale farmers that have basic concepts. In Uganda, and I think across Africa and the world, majority of the farmers still own basic phones, or what we call feature phones. So you basically have to develop for, since we're developing for farmers, developing only for the mobile, for the smartphone would actually be leaving out majority of the farming community. So we have both SMS capabilities, and then for farmers actually that have smartphones, they can also be able to use that. We also go ahead and provide weather and market information. We do agriculture insurance, that is drought, the weather index scheme that the government of Uganda, of course, has supported that. They actually go ahead and subsidize premiums for weather index insurance up to 50% for small-scale farmers. We also operate a village agent model. So these are actually our foot soldiers on the ground. These are the people that actually, each of them has a smartphone that they use to profile these farmer groups, profile each member of the group, and then go ahead and capture input demand for each of the farmer groups. And then based on that information, we extend credit in form of inputs. The farmers don't actually receive money, but we actually work with certified agro input companies to deliver inputs on credit to these farming communities. On top of that, we've also recently started delivering complete actually courses on different topics. We started with financial literacy, or that we call MOOCs. We actually design a course in audio format that can be translated into different local languages. And then farmers use basic answers to call in a normal telephone number. The system, cuts them off, and then they can actually, it calls them back immediately. And then they browse through the content, 1 to 2 minutes. Lecture or lesson.
Daniel, we cannot hear you well. Could you please stop your
maybe
video?
That has about help to answer. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, now it's fine.
Sorry. So I was mentioning that we deploy a variety of mobile-based tools for efficient delivery of extension services to benefit small-scale farmers. Our mobile-based platforms currently reach about 50,000 farmers in Uganda and Zambia. 40% of those are actually women. In Uganda, we currently work with the Ministry of Agriculture to actually integrate this into the national extension system. In Zambia, we work with the Ministry of Fisheries and Livestock to provide digital services to farmers. And these tools include, as I mentioned, our mobile-based application. We also have toll-free SMS short codes that actually enable farmers to access a platform even if they don't have credit on their phones. Farmers, first of all, register using their handsets by providing us with their name, their location in terms of the district, sub-county, and then, of course, their full name, and they send that with toll-free short code. So then we actually we use that basic to do basic profiling. So when this farmer, for example, next time asks a question, then you can actually be able to tell where they're located. And of course, in Uganda, the extension service is based at the sub-county level. So then you can actually be able to localize the information based at the sub-county. So as I mentioned, farmers register on the platform using their basic concept by providing basic information, location information, their district, sub-county, their name, and send that with toll-free short code, which is 8228. That is done free of charge across all networks. Then going forward, they can be able to use their phones, their basic handsets by using the SMS function to ask any questions concerning agriculture. And that comes to this central database, and that forwards them to the respective extension officers based at the sub-county and experts in different fields. If a farmer has a smartphone, they can actually be able to take a picture of their diseased plant or animal and send that along. So when it comes to the platform, the extension officer that has a smartphone can actually be able to see these pictures to actually get more information about what the farmer's problem is. So then there's more information from the pictures, because you can actually take up to 4 pictures and attach them to the question. So before the extension officer responds to the farmer's question, we basically have pictorial evidence of what the problem actually could be. As I mentioned, so I've taken the 3 screenshots. We've made some upgrades, of course, on this as well. But basically, as you can see, we have you can be able to attach images. We have keywords for different local languages, for the major languages across Uganda. Take information about the farmer's name, the telephone number. Then the farmers, once the farmer sends a question and the extension officer responds, then the farmer instantly gets back the response. They can also be able to ask follow-up questions. There's actually no limit on how many messages a farmer can be able to send. We go ahead and, as I mentioned, we do not stop at providing extension services, because we realize that providing information only is not good enough. So if you tell me, for example, go ahead and let's say buy this improved variety of soybean or maize or this, the farmer, most farmers will say, well, I do not have the money to buy these improved technologies that you're actually recommending. So then we came up with this subsidy, rather this micro input loan facility that also integrates agriculture insurance using the government's agro input scheme. So we integrate seed, fertilizer, agriculture insurance, so that the MFI is actually very comfortable in offering credit to these small-scale farmers, because even when the season is actually bad, they can actually be able to recover their money from the compensation from the insurance companies. This is done in cooperation with the government of Uganda and international satellite providers, because when the government of Uganda was establishing the scheme, it worked with a Dutch satellite company that actually provides monitoring information. So at the end of the season, they provide a monitoring report that shows the percentage of loss for every sub-county across Uganda, upon which then compensation is actually made to farmers that paid for insurance at the beginning of the season.
Thank you, Daniel. May I ask you to conclude already, because we really have to give the floor to other panelists to describe their cases. And I think this was an excellent place that we can actually conclude the talk with the importance of the platform for insurance and assessing the risk for credits to farmers.
Well, I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. And if there are any follow-up questions, I'll be glad to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you. There are questions already to you on the question and answer section. And I would like to invite Sue from Kenya. We stay in the same continent. Please go ahead.
Hi, Nevena. Thank you very much. Is my presentation visible?
Yes.
Can you see my presentation there?
Yes. Fantastic.
Okay, great. Thank you. So my name is Sue. I'm a social entrepreneur. I've been working in the ag space in Kenya for the past 20 years now, 21 years to be exact. And we look at leveraging ICT for smallholder farmer knowledge building, not for solving their problems on the ground, but for solving their problems before they actually have them, for building their knowledge so that they can actually manage and understand the problems they may be facing at a different level based on knowledge and without needing to rely on inputs, expensive inputs, pesticides, fertilizers, etc., if they can manage without them. We started in 2010, we started with building for farmers. I've written at the top there, those two columns, connected, because all farmers, most farmers are connected. Some are not connected with internet. So we're talking about those with feature phones that I call connected but no internet. And then those that have got smartphones, tablets, computers are connected with internet. And we've built for both sides, but our original build of iCow was for the connected with no internet feature phone. The tech that we use is a variety of different channels, SMS, USSD, web, Android, iOS, and Zoom. Our content is 360 about family farms, farmers themselves, their livestock, their crops, their soils. We're a go-to shop for knowledge around all those areas. Well, not a shop, farmers don't pay. We built various tools that farmers use that are beyond just content, but actually work with them to optimize their production systems. Some of those in the form of calendars, livestock calendars, crop calendars, soil calendars, excuse me, compost calendars. And then we also have a lot of tools that collect farm records and responds to farmers with the right information that they need based on those records. We have a few programs that we operate, the Africa Dairy Genetic Game Program in Ethiopia and Tanzania and Kenya, Rwanda and Uganda starting. We've had X for Farmers, which was during COVID time, which was a veterinary service for farmers. We also have a digital milk recording certificate program, and we recently started the iCow soil advocacy program, which we worked with people that were not farmers. We actually started this with border borders, who were the motorbike riders, and trained them to become extension agents on the ground around soils. That's a hugely exciting space that we're in the moment, which is focused on soils. We get, of course, a lot of data capture through all of the records that the farmers are giving us, crop information, livestock, soil, etc. Our countries of operation with our feature phone version are Kenya, Ethiopia, Tanzania. We're in 6 languages. In our smartphone version, we're global, and we've got over 30,000 users, the majority from, funnily enough, actually in Pakistan. And then we're currently running a few campaigns. We have 1.6 million users who've used our non-internet connected service and about 30,000 the internet service. We've disseminated 110 million SMSs through that service in the last 10 years. This is just to show one of our services. It's the milk certificate service. All of this data that you're seeing here, 46,000, this is less than a year old. And all of the data that you can see here has actually been provided onto the platform from farmers with feature phones. So we can create, by using systems, visibility of people on the ground who are not connected to the internet. This represents 13 million Kenyan shillings of milk. And the average milk yield you can see on the side there is 372,000 liters of milk. So my point of this slide is just to show you that you can collect data from farmers and give farmers customized feedback back around their data on the feature phone side. This next slide just shows, as I've said, our product is looking at the farmer, the whole farming system and the farm and the farming family. At the beginning of COVID, we put all the hotlines, the COVID hotlines across the entire country on the platform. This data just shows who has been accessing that hotline in what part of the country. So there's a whole bunch of information. When they access it on feature phones, they get the telephone numbers of their COVID support on the ground. This here is our maize calendar feedback system. This is feedback, again, directly from farmers on the ground on their feature phones. And this was really interesting. The calendar farmers register the day they plant their maize, and then they get drip-fed information along the entire planting process. They also showed how to dry their maize properly. And what we've seen from the results of this particular product, which is very cool, is that farmers have used less pesticide, less fertilizer, and they've had less maize lost in post-harvest, and increased on average across the farmers. There's about 3,500 farmers who've used this service. It's been used 5,000 plus times, so they're using it multiple times now. And we've seen that the average increase in maize yield, the bulk of which can be contributed to iCow, is over 109%, which means that farmers are doubling their yields through feature phone support. It doesn't have to be smartphone. We've just recently launched a, beginning of November, 1,000 compost campaign, which is getting farmers on our platform engaged across the country in soil activities around compost, which is inoculating their soils with the life, the microbial life that comes in compost. The figure today is over, I think, 676 piles so far, just within the last 11 days. So we're definitely going to hit that mark of 1,000 composts well before time. Not sure what we're going to do about that though. We'll have to up our benchmark. My final slide was where we're going, but my slide seems to be stopping. Where I would like to go and talk about is the fact that digitization must mind the gaps. One of the biggest gaps are feature phone users, and the other gap is soils. A lot of digitization is focused on inputs and aggregators, input providers, agro dealers, getting their products down onto the ground. But the biggest problem we have in most places across the world, we've just seen that with the World Summit on sustainable foods, and we're seeing it now with the SDGs, with climate smart agriculture, with the climate change, etc. Regenerative agriculture is the way to go, inoculating the grounds with microbes and covering our soils to make sure that we can draw down that carbon. That has got to be the way that we go. The more inputs we put in the ground, the less likely this is going to happen, and the more turmoil we're going to face. So I will end my presentation there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. I cannot agree more with you that we have to pay more attention to the soil. And now we are moving to Asia, to China, and I would like to give the floor to Ms. Xinli Yin to talk about another type of platform, giant platform, if I may say so. Please, you have the floor.
Hi, can you see my screen? Great. So just to give you a quick introduction of Pinduoduo and who we are. So as introduced, I'm the Executive Director of Sustainability and Agricultural Impact at Pinduoduo. We are a 6-year-old company. We currently connect 850 million consumers across China to 16 million farmers. So on our platform, these farmers, either themselves or through a cooperative or perhaps through a third party, can sell their fresh produce directly to consumers. In 2020, there was over $42 billion worth of agricultural products transacted through our platform. So how do we do this? On our platform, what we are doing is streamlining the national distribution chain. So on the top half of this slide is a situation that many of you might be familiar with, right? Where there's a very roundabout traditional supply chain and the farmer actually doesn't make very much out of this. Now on the bottom, what we are doing is providing a channel for farmers to connect directly with consumers. And we do this by aggregating consumer demand. So on our platform, consumers are incentivized to form team purchases where they make purchases in teams of 2. But what this does is that it helps to draw demand, or it helps to aggregate it onto fewer products. So maybe, Nevena wanted to buy apples and I wanted to buy bananas. Right, but I see there's a great deal on bananas and I invite Nevena along. So actually, that demand for apples moved over to bananas, and we can actually give farmers a lot more clarity and visibility into the order volumes that they can generate on the platform. Now, this translates to a win-win for both farmers and consumers, because in this example with garlic, what the farmer is doing is they're effectively pricing it at 4 RMB per kilogram, which is a fraction of what the consumer used to pay. But net, after taking care of the logistics and the packaging, which the farmer now does, he's still making 30% higher income. So that allows them to reinvest back into their farms. Now, on top of giving consumers better value, we can also deliver fresher produce and reduce food loss and waste along the way as well. So again, on the top half, you have kind of the traditional setup. And on the bottom half, this is what we're investing in doing. Because we have 850 million consumers, because we have so many data points about what people are looking out for, and we're also getting more information on what is produced on the upstream, what we can do is work together with third-party third-party logistics providers to improve the cold chain route planning so that there's a more optimized path. Products can take a quicker time to get to consumers, and consumers get to enjoy fresher products at a very affordable price. One example of how we do this is through Duoduo Grocery, which is a new service that we rolled out in August last year. What this does is allow consumers to pick up their fresh produce orders in less than 24 hours from the time that they place these orders. So how we're doing it is that we're matching local supply with local demand. This means that the fresh produce has to travel less of a distance. So for some things that you can imagine, like eggs or tomatoes, these don't need to come from a very far part of the country, right? Oftentimes you have some localized production that you can actually match with that demand. So what we're doing here is, again, reinventing the agricultural distribution chain such that it's a function of both cold chain trucks, existing capacity, and consumers fulfilling the last mile themselves. So the savings in the last mile logistics can then be spread between the consumer and also feeding towards the midstream, right, or the upstream with the farmers. And I think all of this circles back to a very important point that Marzia made in her presentation earlier. We need to engage youths, right? We need to bring in a new generation of farmers. So to that end, one thing that Pinduoduo has been investing in is also building up human capital in agriculture. So we have a program called Duoduo Academy, which we've launched since 2015 when we were founded, and we've trained over 100,000 new farmers since. So these new farmers are basically younger people who have some education, who are more digitally savvy, and we give them training in terms of how to run a business, right? What do you need to pay attention to for e-commerce? And we also add on some agricultural training. So tapping into the agronomic institutes in China, like China Agricultural University, bringing in some of that agricultural know-how and delivering it in a format that is accessible and preferred by youths, right? As Marzia shared earlier. So, you can access the classes through live streaming, for instance. You can access it online. And we also have offline courses as well. And our goal is to train another 100,000 of these new farmers over the next 5 years. And lastly, I just wanted to share an example of how, we form tripartite partnerships with the local governments as well as these agronomic institutes to create pilot farms, right, where we can also bring the fruits of digitization to more farmers. So what we've seen from the earlier presentations is that farmers can accept or are willing to embrace new technologies if it is contextualized, if the benefits can be shown to them. And that's what we're doing through these pilot farms. So we have a pilot citrus farm, for instance, where we've invested $2.3 million and created a cooperative where they now receive training in terms of the right types of varieties of citrus that they should be growing. They've embraced drip irrigation and also drone spraying, and that has led to a reduction in terms of the input required, right? So 15% less fertilizer and 30% less labor. So that's a very tangible example of how a private corporate like ourselves, with the access to the end markets, can incentivize or help to move the farmers along together with other stakeholders in the farming ecosystem. So with that, I'll just wrap up here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And before we go to the last presentation in Norway, I would like to ask you, Ms. Lim, and also the other panelists to respond to some questions that I'm going to ask now, but you please respond into the chat section. The question to you, Ms. Lim, would be, I see your platform is very much oriented to the future and to empowering smallholder farmers. What are your next steps to support and empower those smallholders? And the question to Daniel, Sue, would be more about what kind of policy support you would need in order that your business would flourish and you'll continue to empower smallholders. Please respond to the chat, and Gunn-Turid, you have the floor. We saved the most interesting part for the last.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Gunn-Turid Kvam, and I'm a researcher at RURALIS, Institute for Rural and Regional Research in Trondheim in Norway. I'm going to present a case study of small sheep farmers and advice in uptake of digital technology. That is part of the AgriLink project. Can you show next slide, Mark? Yes. The case study, it was carried out in Sogn og Fjordane, a county in Norway, in 2018. Then there were about 1,500 sheep farmers in the county. Compared to other counties, it is very steep. It has rough terrain, smaller holdings, and a huge grazing areas in the mountains. Sheep farmers, they have a rather low status in Norway, and this also mirror provision of advice that is nearly no existence. On the other hand, they are very active, have a very active association, the Norwegian Sheep and Goat, where most sheep farmers are members. In 2009, predators killed about 3,000 sheep in the county. And this led to a project initiated by the county governor, where they encouraged sheep farmers to test electronic bells on sheep to follow their movements and then avoid loss of animals. They offer subsidized bells because the bells was very high in price. 2 startup companies were offering bells. One utilized the mobile net and the other satellite to send information from the bells to the farmer, who had to assess the information through their smartphones, computers, or iPad. These companies were very small and they were located far away from the county, and they didn't have many resources for advice. Thank you. Next slide. The county governor demanded that applications for support of e-bells had to go through formalized pasture groups. A pasture group consists of sheep farmers that use a common pasture and that has cooperated for decades in collecting sheep in the autumn. And usually they consisted of from 2, 3 up to 15 sheep farmers. The county also established a pilot project in some pasture groups to test the use of the bells. And information about the project and experience from the pilot project was presented at meetings for sheep farmers, where also suppliers sometimes were invited to present their products. And these activities resulted in many applications from pasture groups to buy subsidized bells on behalf of their members. We carried out 19 interviews with sheep farmers in the county belonging to different pasture groups. Most of them were part-time farmers. They were more than 50 years, and they only had less than 50 sheep, most of them. But results show that the leader of the pasture group usually had an important role for members' uptake of the technology. He or she informed and organized applications on behalf of members and supported farmers with less digital competence in programming, training them in how to use the bell and how to interpret the data. And results show also that farmers with computer skills, they reported that they discussed with peers, sporadic with suppliers, but mainly they managed uptake themselves. On the other hand, farmers without computer skills, they relied on peers in their pasture group. Next slide, thank you. A large number of farmers implemented electronic bells, and the case is successful regarding diffusion of a new technology. It was a smart way of organizing uptake through pasture groups where farmers supported each other. But a prerequisite for success was also social capital among farmers. The use of the technology increased farmers' engagement in sheep farming and social activities among farmers. And as one farmer said, it makes it more interesting for the younger generation to take over the farm. But the case also shows some more general advisory challenges. It shows that there is a need for advice for uptake of a relatively simple digital technology. And it is possible to question if it is sustainable in the long run that farmers are responsible to advise each other. Sometimes Sometimes it might be, sometimes not. It might be quite demanding. For small farmers, it may be too expensive to buy digital technology and to buy advice for uptake. And there are different models for providing small farmers without computer skills with advice. But I suppose in most cases, there is a need of support from public authorities in one way or another to secure the uptake. Yes, thank you.
Very much. With this, we would conclude this last session. And before I give the floor for observations from the view of Professor Gianluca Bruni from the Zero Project, I would like to thank all the panelists. All the cases that have been presented demonstrate the great potential that digital tools have to play in advisory work, but also they also demonstrate the challenges that advisory services are facing, and this can be only overcome with a specific conducive environment like policies and infrastructure, credit, etc. So with this, I thank you once again for the active participation as well on the chat and the question and answer session. And I would like to pass the floor to Gianluca. Thank you.
Thank you, Nevena. Thank you very much, and congratulations for this workshop. Very, very interesting, and for your work in general that shows an impressive accumulation of reflection of work. I start, as Nevena already mentioned, I am coordinator of a project named DESIRA, which is a digitalization socioeconomic impact in rural areas and in agriculture. I would like to address especially the challenges related to the digitalization. We have seen that digitalization has an enormous potential on the role and on the, let's say, the perspective of farmers in any context. But I think that we really need to address challenges that are at different scales. And at a general, very general and global scales, I think that we have to start understanding that it's a time to change the narrative about digitalization, because if on one hand we see the incredible and potential of digitalization, we cannot accept the idea that digitalization alone can, let's say, save the world, because simply this is only one of the conditions. And even if the more recent narrative that says that we can save the world provided that access to digital technologies ensured at all, it's not sufficient. Why it is not sufficient, and to what extent these narratives should change? I think that, first of all, digital technologies alone won't guarantee sustainability if we are not changing the models of agriculture. And we know, and we have seen in the recent Global Food System Summit, that a transformation is needed and business as usual is not possible anymore. So if digitalization is applied to old models, to conventional models, we won't do much road away. On the contrary, there is the risk to increase the divide, because we see that the tendency of the current food system is towards concentration, and we see a lot of examples of concentration, land grabbing, etc., in several places of the world, even in Europe. The second aspect is that digitalization is not a kind of monolith. It is, we have to consider that there are several and a lot of pathways of digitalization. And we have seen here that there are digital pathways that really go in favor of farmers, but not all digital technologies are produced having in mind the small farmers. And so in this case, they tend to reproduce models for example, large scale or very advanced technologies that leave a lot of farms behind. And the third aspect is that the digital technologies have not only benefits, but also they may have economic and social costs, especially if we consider them in relation to the social setting in which they operate. So I think that for this reason, this narrative, it is important to think on how to build the new narrative, because first of all, we have to consider that digital transition and ecological transition are not separate from each other. And the question is how to link together digitalization for a digital transition. And the second aspect is that digitalization is a socio-technical process. So we always have to see how technologies affect the social interaction, the distribution of power, etc. And to a certain extent, how the social innovation can anticipate innovation in technology and how can affect it. So considering that digital technologies are flexible, they can be shaped in relation to the goals. And if there are sustainability goals, we can really think about shaping technologies in favor of farmers' need, gender equality, no one left behind. But the problem is that we have to be in control of this innovation pathway, and farmers and then their organization and farmer extension should be, let's say, the main drivers of this movement towards innovative pathways. So I think that one important aspect to consider is that farmers and farmers advisors should be able to imagine new socio-technical configuration. We have seen in the examples that, for example, the digitalization can be used to get information, but also, as Nevena said, to move from information to knowledge. We know that digitalization can be mobilized for diversification, for cooperation rather than just competition, to link up to the markets. So to, let's say, to disintermediate the steps from consumers to producers, and also to transforming labor and also including gender roles. So there are a lot of potentials of transformation of business models, of operations, etc., that digitalization can help. And on this regard, advisory services, I think, are a key component, but they are key components of a digital ecosystem. I think that Puyun, if I'm not wrong, also identified several actors that are relevant in this process of digitalization. And there is a strong need to coordinate these actors together. We have to connect together infrastructures, skilled users, technology developers, services, data, device. For example, in the issue of data, sometimes there is a kind of chicken egg. You can't provide services if you don't have data, but if you don't have data, you cannot have services. So in this case, it is important that actors, link them up together in order to create potentiality for new connections. And actually, advisory services are really, let's say, connectors between all these aspects. So I think that in the end, it is important to see advisory services as something that connects, that contextualize. I've seen several times this, let's say, reference to contextualization, because generic information is of less value. So it is important that information, but also technologies are contextualized. And also it would be important to give priorities where there is a public funding on the capacity to provide affordable services. So starting from, let's say, affordable services that can become an entry level for a mass digitalization. So I think that in the end, I could generate just a question rather than let's say, conclusions. And my question, and my main question to all of you is, will advisory and extension services be able to reorganize their activity in relation to the digital transformation and to the ecological transition? I think that this is a key question, and which competencies will they need and which connections they will establish with, for example, university and research centers, and what are the steps to make advisory services proactive on digital transformation and not just follower, and what kind of tools they use. So with this question, I think that there are a lot of aspects, a lot of challenges to be addressed, but at the same time, I think that webinars like this are really giving an important contribution to answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gianluca, for your excellent observations, recommendations, and also the excellent question that you formulated. Since we have our e-discussion still open, this we can definitely reflect into this process. But also in future, FAO is very willing to take this question further up. As I said, we are planning to have a global foresight. So this type of questions are truly very relevant. I would like to give the floor to Pierre and to Salvaraggio for closing words, and I have to express my gratitude to both of them for this event. Salvaraggio, I know, was supposed to be on another meeting, but he stayed here and very actively contributed, and we are very grateful for this. So Pierre, Salvaraggio, would you like to take the floor for a minute or so? Over to you.
Thank you, Nevena. I know, just I want to say thanks to everybody, all the panel members, as well as the participants for active engagement in this discussion. Of course, everything was said, and I don't have much to add. So thank you so much again. Yeah.
So thank you, Nevena. I would also say a word briefly. So I think it was very important for AgriLink and for us to have this event with you, because I think having this North-South exercise of cross-fertilization of debate is very interesting. We have seen many examples that show the wide and mind-blowing example about digitalization in very different contexts, and often brought also by actors outside the agricultural sector. So I think it was very interesting, and it raised, and I really support the challenges raised by Gianluca. So there is a great potentiality, but major challenge about how to make sure we have also low-tech digitalization that allow inclusiveness, but also about the big challenge to combine this digitalization with more, let's say, traditional competencies of the sectors on face-to-face advisory services. And that will be a challenge for the next year, which relates to the question of power balance and governance of digitalization of advisory services. which is how to address on a global level. It's related to histories and it's context specific, but I think that's something we will need to continue discussing about. So yeah, lots of very interesting insight, and again, very rich to combine our European perspective with your broader view on the subject. So, and again, thanks to all panelists and facilitator, and to Gianluca for the conclusion. And I hope to see you soon, all of you, in another context. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you very much.